The last flight, the silence that fell from the skies. It was a morning like any other, but for the 231 passengers on flight AI-271, it would be their last. As they took off from Delhi bound for Mumbai, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The sky was clear, visibility was good, and the crew followed all protocols. However, 37 minutes before landing, a sudden loss of communication with the control tower triggered an alert. The aircraft disappeared from radar, and silent chaos began to set in. Anguish gripped the families waiting at the airport, a harbinger of grief approaching with sharp claws. The clock became an enemy, the minutes stretched out in despair. Each unanswered call echoed like a silent scream in the chests of those waiting. Aviation. Experts say that the first 15 minutes after loss of contact are crucial. It's the time when hope still survives, when the mind insists on creating controlled emergency scenarios. However, when minutes turn into hours, absence begins to transform into certainty. And that's where the devastating psychological aspect comes in. The human brain doesn't handle not knowing well. The lack of information provokes despair, tears, and paralyzes. Suffering intensifies, not only because of the pain of possible loss, but also because of the powerlessness in the face of the invisible. Every second fuels narratives that clash with the cruel reality. Emotional pain surpasses any rational logic. This stage of the human drama reminds us of the need for more empathy in crisis communications. The lack of immediate responses leads to emotional collapse, leaving entire families in states of shock, despair, and even anger. Why isn't there a more humane protocol? Where is the respect for emotions when all that's offered is a "we're investigating"? Tragedy settles not only in the sky, but in the hearts of those left behind, crying out for affection and a modicum of consideration. It is in this gap between silence and indifference that the pain becomes unbearable and society reveals its emotional unpreparedness. The lack of humanity behind the scenes in aviation is as serious as the technical failures. The final cockpit recording revealed a tense but technical tone. The captain reported control instability and a warning about a partial electrical failure. The recording ended abruptly with a silence that echoed like a scream. This seemingly trivial technical detail opened the door to heated discussions about the maintenance of the company's aircraft, which had already been the subject of previous complaints. When reconstructing the final seconds of the flight, experts realized that the systems were operating at minimal redundancy, a sign of a serious failure. The coldness of the data contrasts with the warmth of the lives that were there. From a psychological standpoint, imagining the last conscious seconds of the crew and passengers is an exercise in painful comprehension. There is a moment when everyone realizes what is to come. Hearts race, eyes wander, searching for a non-existent exit, hands clasp, prayers are whispered. It is at this moment that the instinct of love overrides all rationality. Parents embrace their children. Couples exchange knowing glances. Strangers become brothers in grief. It is the pinnacle of humanity in the face of imminent doom. There are reports from survivors of other accidents who describe these moments as eternal, where time loses its meaning. In the technical field, the alert reinforces the debate over the reliability of aircraft operating in countries with lax maintenance policies. How is it possible that, in 2025, safety is still being neglected in the name of economics? Where are the regulatory bodies? Where is institutional kindness when human lives are at stake? Trust in air travel is based on a promise of care and excellence. When that promise is broken, what remains is outrage. And this outrage needs to be converted into action, into practical and transformative wisdom that prevents further tragedies. It took 14 hours of relentless searching until the wreckage was located in a difficult-to-access mountainous area in the state of Maharashtra. Helicopters circled overhead as rescue teams attempted to reach the scene. There were no survivors. The impact was devastating. Drone footage showed pieces of the fuselage scattered among uprooted trees, bodies covered with blue tarps, and an abysmal silence that spoke volumes. The scene, devoid of sound, was one of mute, suffocating violence. And while the toll was being announced, names and human stories were lost in the coldness of the bulletins. For the families, this moment represents the collapse of the last thread of hope. The already suffocating pain takes on irreversible proportions. Psychologists who assisted the families reported panic attacks, nervous breakdowns, and episodes of depersonalization. It's the soul collapsing. Compassion needs to be doubled at this time. And not just healthcare professionals, but society as a whole, which often experiences this type of tragedy with morbidity rather than empathy. We must remember that each name on a list of victims represents a unique universe. Children, mothers, partners, loved ones who now live in mourning. Reconciling with reality is a cruel process. But it is also a call to collective wisdom. How can we honor these lives? How can we transform this horror into a seed of change? This is the turning point where mourning must become struggle. Love must materialize in demands for justice, in cries for dignity. The power of kindness, in this case, is to press so that this never happens again. May the memory of these people be a seed, not a statistic. And may each tear shed sprout roots of ethical, technical, and human transformation. The pain of loss does not end with the official announcement of the disaster. It only begins there. The families of passengers face a tortuous journey, marked by longing, guilt, anger, and an inexplicable emptiness. Many report feeling as if they are living in a suspended time, where everything stopped at the exact moment they received the news. The voices, the laughter, the memories begin to inhabit a dreamlike space between reality and imagination. It is in this space that affection resists oblivion. Some still prepare breakfast as if their loved one were about to walk through the door. Psychologists specializing in grief affirm that sudden loss, such as that caused by plane crashes, generates a type of trauma deeper than most natural grief. There is no goodbye. There is no time to prepare. The brain enters a cycle of denial that can last for years. Therefore, public policies aimed at psychological support for families are urgently needed. And more than that, respect for the stages of grief is essential. Empathy cannot be an automatic protocol. It must be an ongoing action. Every pain needs to be heard, welcomed, and not made invisible. From a social perspective, the way we treat those left behind reveals how far we are from the power of collective kindness. How many families have been forced to fight alone for information, compensation, and justice? The trauma deepens when, in addition to the pain, they face inhumane bureaucracy. The system seems more concerned with protecting companies than with supporting individuals. And this forces us to consider, what value are we truly giving to life? True reconciliation lies not in closing the case, but in ensuring that memory translates into policies of affection, care, and respect. During the investigation, disturbing information came to light. The control tower did not immediately respond to the crew's alert. There are indications that, in the most critical moments, there were failures in the coordination of emergency actions. This sparked a fierce debate about the training of professionals, their excessive workloads, and the psychological pressure they face. Are we entrusting our skies to an overloaded and flawed system? The line between error and tragedy is thin when it comes to precious seconds. And in those seconds, entire lives vanish into thin air. Inside the towers, controllers operate under extreme stress. Every decision made in a matter of seconds can determine the fate of hundreds of people. Many do not receive adequate psychological support or sufficient rest breaks. A lack of understanding of the emotional toll of this role can lead to fatal errors. The A271 accident may have been a sad example of this. It is not enough to point fingers. It is necessary to reform, invest, and care. The lives of those who fly are directly linked to the health of those who guide. Love for the profession must be accompanied by genuine human support. Respect cannot be selective. If we want to prevent further tragedies, we must see everyone involved with a human perspective. Training, technology, and emotional support must go hand in hand. And perhaps this is the time to ask ourselves, does the current aviation system value precision or the health of its operators more? Inspiration can come from courageous reforms. How about investing more in quality of life than in air traffic speed? Perhaps therein lies the beginning of the wisdom still missing behind the scenes in aviation. A preliminary report indicated that the aircraft involved in the accident had already exhibited hydraulic system failures in recent months. Technical warnings were ignored by internal bureaucracy, and maintenance decisions were postponed. The question that arises with brutal clarity is, where does profit end and where does concern for life begin? This is the central moral dilemma that this case exposes. The coldness of corporate mathematics cannot override the sacredness of human life. Every hour of flight ignoring signs of technical wear is tantamount to playing with someone else's death. The pain of tragedy often begins in the spreadsheet dot. It's revolting to imagine that a simple decision to postpone maintenance, due to cost, has condemned hundreds of lives. Here, the absence of wisdom is glaring. This isn't just a technical failure, but a chain of omissions, negligence, and unethical choices. Compassion must also reach the backstage of aviation, where administrative decisions have the power to kill. We need to talk about corporate responsibility more seriously. CEOs and boards of directors cannot hide behind cold reports and institutional rhetoric. We must accept blame with dignity and urgently review our stances. The world needs to rethink what we call progress. When technological innovation doesn't go hand in hand with ethics and love for others, the result is tragedy. The I-271 case is more than an accident. It's an open wound in the conscience of a sector that urgently needs reconciliation with its most human values. The power of kindness in this scenario manifests itself in small choices of integrity, in decisions that prioritize people over profit margins. Aviation must once again become a symbol of excellence, not precariousness. And society must learn to demand this before more lives are lost. While the bodies were still being recovered, television channels were already broadcasting shocking images, invasive interviews, and irresponsible assumptions. The spectacularization of pain has become routine. What should be a moment of silence and respect is transformed into content. Where is journalistic kindness? Where are the ethics of caring for those who suffer? In the pursuit of ratings, the limits of grief are ignored. In the name of full coverage, the suffering of others becomes a spectacle. The camera, which should inform, begins to emotionally abuse those still digesting the trauma. Psychologically, the overexposure of the tragedy reopens wounds. Family members reported anxiety attacks after watching the reports. There is a clear disconnect between the right to information and the duty to understand the suffering of others. The line between informing and exploiting has been blurred, and viewers end up becoming unwitting accomplices to this insensitivity. The ethics of communication urgently need to be reclaimed. Instead of sensationalist headlines, why not reports that honor the memory of the victims? Journalistic empathy is possible and necessary. Because not every image should be captured. Not every silence should be broken. Perhaps it's time to reflect on what we consume. The power of kindness also lies in turning off the TV, silencing our cell phones, and simply showing respect. What kind of society are we shaping when tragedies become entertainment and tears are transformed into ratings? The responsibility isn't just the media's, it's ours too. What we share, what we comment on, what we like, all of this shapes the information market. Journalism cannot become a predator of pain. We need to rehumanize the news with love and wisdom. Because dignity shouldn't depend on ratings. On the same day of the accident, the name of the flight was trending worldwide. Messages of condolence, conspiracy theories, tributes, fake news, and bad jokes. The internet, with its cruel speed, has become the new battleground between solidarity and dehumanization. And this phenomenon exposes an unprecedented crisis of empathy. In just a few minutes, grief was edited into memes, and the pain of families was exposed to thousands of public comments. Real tragedy became viral content. Grief became a collective spectacle, devoid of respect. For some, the pain of others is just another post. For others, it's a mirror of their own fear. But for those directly affected, every public message about the disaster can be a devastating emotional trigger. The lack of filters and the rush to express an opinion expose a failure of understanding. What happened to our ability to simply feel with others without seeking likes? Digital culture needs a moral break. Moderation policies are not enough. It is necessary to educate citizens with emotional responsibility. Because behind every trending topic, there is a real tragedy. We need to restore wisdom in the use of social media. Digital love exists, but it needs to be cultivated responsibly. Perhaps the greatest challenge of our time is to reclaim humanity in virtual spaces, where everything seems permitted and almost nothing is reflected. Pain shouldn't be an algorithm. Suffering can't become engagement. May I271 teach us to pause before posting, to think before sharing. Because the power of kindness also resides in small, invisible gestures. A respectful silence can be more transformative than 1,000 rushed words. As the investigations progress, legal obstacles and attempts to conceal evidence arise. The airline, instead of honestly acknowledging the tragedy, opts for evasive statements and damage containment protocols. Justice drags on, and families see their requests lost in bureaucratic mazes. With each postponed hearing, a new wound opens. With each legal recourse, moral reparation seems further away. The pain, which should be embraced, becomes a lawsuit. Indignation builds not only for what was lost, but for everything that is not done. Institutional silence also kills. This delay hurts even more. Forgiveness only begins to be possible when there is genuine acknowledgement of the pain. When the truth is stifled, there is no room for reconciliation. Emotional justice is as important as legal justice. And the feeling of impunity transforms grief into revolt, eroding any possibility of peace. When the system fails to protect and also to punish, it loses its noblest function, ensuring dignity. Time, which should heal, becomes poison, and the faces of those responsible disappear behind positions, clauses, and legal loopholes. The lack of answers is as cruel as the plane crash. It is unacceptable that time heals wounds that the system refuses to treat. The inspiration that could arise from tragedy fades when discourse is empty. Therefore, it is urgent that we demand not only investigations, but also accountability. Love, in this case, is synonymous with justice. Without it, the cycle of pain repeats itself. The judiciary, regulatory bodies, legislators all have a moral role to fulfill. Every denied sentence is a violated memory. May justice be more than a formality. May it be the mirror of our collective commitment to life. Because a future is only possible when the past is honored with truth. Tragedies like I-271 need to be more than forgotten headlines. They need to become milestones for change. We need to transform pain into purpose, fear into vigilance, mourning into action. To achieve this, it is essential that society push for reforms in the aviation sector, stricter oversight, more humane emergency protocols, and public policies to support victims. The cycle of impunity must be broken. Each life lost must be converted into new standards of protection. May each plane crash lift us up as a society. May we no longer fly blind, emotionally and institutionally. Collective compassion has revolutionary power. It can, indeed, change systems, but only if accompanied by real mobilization. Feeling is not enough, it must be acted upon. Inspiration springs when suffering is transformed into fuel for a more just world, when the loss of one becomes a lesson for millions. The power of kindness can be applied with technique, science, and political decision-making. There are already countries that have transformed tragedies into exemplary policies. Why not ours? Change cannot be a temporary response, but a permanent structure based on respect for life. If we are to truly honor the lives lost on this flight, we must become agents of the change that the world of aviation and empathy so desperately needs. May each of these souls fly eternally as a symbol of a cry that will not be silenced. And may this cry echo in regulations, in investments, in human care. We cannot accept that the normalization of tragedy becomes security policy. Because the true future of aviation lies not only in the skies, but in the ethical soil we decided to build together. A soil where love, responsibility, and wisdom are always above the clouds. Among the wreckage recovered from Flight AI-271 was the black box. More than a technical artifact, it became a symbol. It stored the last sounds, the last commands, the last human reactions to the impossible. Upon listening to its recording, experts reported tense voices, attempts at recovery, and finally silence. This silence echoes not only in the investigators' headphones, but within all of us. What the black box reveals is more than data. It exposes the failure of systems, the collapse of trust, the last breath of a series of lives cut short. It is a soundless cry that demands to be heard by all, even if it hurts. For many families, the contents of the black box were the only tangible fragment of the goodbye that never happened. Hearing the voice of a loved one in their final moments can be devastating, but it can also be an emotional turning point. Pain becomes humanized when absence gains sound. Love, in this case, transforms into listening. It is at this level that empathy materializes, not as pity, but as an attempt to understand what was experienced there, second by second, inside a collapsing cockpit. There is no technology that can translate what it feels like to hear a life come to an end. The recording ends, but the scar remains. The technical content of the black box raised new questions. Why were the warnings not heeded? Why did the commands fail in a cascade? But it also raised ethical questions. To what extent is the exposure of pain justifiable in the name of truth? Are we prepared to deal with total transparency? The black box records not only what was said, but also what we failed to hear as a society. It doesn't just belong to the aircraft, it belongs to us. And perhaps we all need to press play on our own conscience. Because when the truth is muffled, the danger of repeating mistakes multiplies. Life demands that we learn from the noise and the silence. Among the many silences that remained after the AI-271 disaster, there's an almost invisible group, those who didn't board by chance. People who missed their flight, changed the date, or canceled at the last minute. For them, the feeling of having escaped death coexists with the guilt of having survived. This is what psychology calls survivor's guilt. Life goes on, but under a new weight. The lightness of living mingles with the pain of having stayed. They become ghosts of what could have been. And each new morning brings the memory of those who didn't have it. Survival in this case is a miracle that hurts. These indirect survivors also need care. Many become depressed, emotionally ill, or isolated. Some begin to live as if they must justify their survival. The trauma is real, even without physical injuries. The power of kindness must reach them too. May their stories be heard without judgment. May affection and understanding be part of the emotional support offered. Because living with the knowledge that one escaped by minutes can be as overwhelming as the loss itself. The public narrative rarely gives space to these people, but they exist and suffer in silence. They deserve visibility, support, and respect. And there are still other lives that didn't fly, the futures that were canceled with that flight. Children who will not be born, projects that will not be realized, reunions that will not happen. Each passenger carried plans, hopes, paths open. When an aircraft crashes, it doesn't just take people. It takes possibilities. It takes entire universes. Therefore, we need to rethink how we view air safety, not as a technical detail, but as a pact with the future. Because every right decision saves not just a life, but everything it could have become. And that in itself should be sacred. Every absence is a wound in the history of the world. The Air India A271 accident is not just a tragic statistic. It reflects a system that still fails where it should protect, that still saves where it should care. It is also a cruel portrait of our society, which has grown accustomed to consuming tragedies as content and forgetting faces and names in a matter of days. This story needs to provoke us. How long will we normalize human error disguised as a technical failure? How far do the ethical limits of commercial exploitation of human lives go? The accident is also a moral verdict on inverted priorities. Data from the International Civil Aviation Organization indicates that 38% of air accidents in the last 5 years were directly caused by avoidable failures in maintenance or operational decisions. This is unacceptable. Are we truly ready to live in a world where air travel becomes an emotional Russian roulette? And furthermore, what have the major airlines done with their billions in profits? Are they investing in safety or digital cosmetics? Are they valuing passengers or treating them as flying statistics? Silence about this is also part of the problem. This is the urgent reflection we need to promote. We need a new pact between technology and humanity. We need to reclaim kindness as the norm, not the exception. May this story not be just a script. May it become living memory, ethical fuel, righteous indignation. Because behind every seat, there was a heart. And it is for the right of each of these hearts that we must continue fighting. May love not be just a posthumous tribute, but a living policy. May empathy be stronger than interests. May life finally be worth more than speed or profit. And you, what will you do with this pain that now also belongs to you? Share this story. Question, demand, write to the appropriate authorities. Support organizations that defend disaster victims. Pressure your airline for more transparency. This text is not an end, it is a beginning. Change begins with each of use with courage, with a voice, and with the power of kindness. Because to remain silent now is to allow the next flight to end the same way. And if this story touched you, moved you, or made you reflect, watch the full video now on our YouTube channel. There, you'll find testimonials, analyses, and images that delve deeper into the impact of this tragedy and reveal what the headlines miss. Click the link in the description, subscribe, and share. Your attention can save lives. Your outrage can create change, because forgetting is allowing, and watching is an act of respect.